The purpose of Wealth Talk is to educate, inform, and hopefully entertain you on the subject of building your wealth. WealthBuilders recommends you should always take independent financial, tax, or legal advice before making any decisions around your finances.
Today's episode is brought to you by WealthBuilders Membership, a proven step-by-step process that helps you achieve financial security within 2 to 3 years. To find out more, head to wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Wealth Talk, the podcast specifically designed to help you build, protect, and transfer your wealth. I'm Kevin Whelan, founder of WealthBuilders. I'm joined by another founder today, Steve Conley, the founder of the Academy of Life Planning. Well, we've got to dive straight in. Steve, what on earth is life planning?
It's great to be here, Kevin. And let me explain what life planning is. It's basically financial planning done properly is the way I describe it. It's planning your life before you plan your money. People can think it's a bit airy-fairy, but so let me explain that it's not straight away. You need to know what you're going to do in your life in order to know how much money you need year by year by year for the rest of your life. So you need to plan your life before you plan your money. You need to put in place what liabilities are going to be each year for the rest of your life before you know what asset strategies to put in place to support them. And a lot of people kind of miss that part and just look at asset strategies, kind of missing completely actually the reason for the money, which is to do something with your life. That's what the money's for. So we need to know that before we do the asset strategies. We need to do a comprehensive lifetime cash flow plan. In order to do that, we need a life plan before we do the financial plan, if that makes sense.
That's a really interesting point because more often than not, I suppose, Steve, people start with products or tactical questions or structures and tactical questions. Should I do an ISA or a bond? Should I do a pension or a LISA? What should I do? There's an awful lot of conversations tend to get started in the world of finance around that. What do you find?
It kind of misses the most important assets, those sort of conversations. So those sort of conversations circulate around regulated retail investments. So let me just tell you how important they are in the overall thing. I mean, your audience probably understands this more than most. But total wealth, if we have a look at the ONS study on wealth and asset survey for the UK, 40% of assets of the average Brit is in property, 40% is occupational pension, 10% savings, 5% is in regulated retail investments. So in terms of total wealth for the average Brit, only 5% is in those sort of products. But the planning really exists across all the categories of wealth, not just the regulated retail investments. So it's a good idea to start about looking at the total picture rather than just 5% of the picture. There is another asset class which I talk a lot about, which is called human capital. It's defined as your present value of future earnings. So it's your earnings that are coming in. So you've got to look at how much money you've got coming in. And again, regulated retail investors and retail advisors don't look at this. But it's actually the majority of your wealth comes from your earnings. You earn 10 times over your lifetime what you save. And very few people really give enough attention to the earnings side of things. And I know your audience do, which is great, which is why I'm here to talk and share that. But it's of the average Brit, a 40-year-old, say in the UK, 80% of their wealth is called this human capital and 20% is financial capital. So if you think 80% of someone's wealth is on average future earnings, the present value of future earnings, only 20% is what you have already. If only 5% of what you have already is in regulated retail investments, then the figure's now down to 1% of your total wealth is in regulated retail investments. So I do laugh when I hear about financial planners who just focus on the 1% and think that's a total wealth planning job, because the total wealth planning is obviously about all your finances, not just the regulated retail investments.
It's an interesting way you frame that, because from a wealth builder perspective, we're always talking about creating recurring income from assets, as opposed to looking specifically at the earnings over someone's lifetime and kind of working out what strategies are to maximize that, to minimize wastage and have I suppose, turn some of that human capital into financial capital as well along the way. It becomes sustainable. Are you coming from that same space?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I define human capital as things you own that can generate earnings. It can be property. It can be skills. It can be intellectual property. It can be your network of people you know, your professional connections. It can be your brand. It's a lot clearer in the commercial world when we talk about businesses, because the total value of a business it's the book value on the balance sheet. It's the market value. And the market to book ratio is significant for some firms, could be as much as 20. So, for example, Coca-Cola, 95% of the value of Coca-Cola is in its brand. If you take tech brands, they tend to have a market to book ratio between 10 and 20, which means that the market value, the intangible value, is 10 times or 20 times the value of the capital value that sits on the balance sheet. So it's easy to understand it in commercial world, but it's often forgotten in the individual planning space. And total wealth planning obviously looks at the total wealth of and it's all about the strategies you talk about, Kevin, leveraging your human capital, whatever that might be, to generate through entrepreneurial opportunities some income.
Take us a step back, Steve. You've given us a nice little wander through some of the initial thoughts and hopefully resonate with those. But you're the founder of something, the Academy of Life Planning. So who are you serving in that academy, and what do those academy members do that traditional advisors don't do? Why are they coming and gravitating towards you?
It's useful to think about how I started. So I was in banking until 15 years ago, and I set up the academy. I started doing planning for a local stockbroker and discretionary manager. And they used me because I, unlike the other IFAs, wasn't interested in taking the assets under management. I was just delivering planning, a fee for service, fixed fee planning. And it sort of grew from that. And eventually other advisors started asking me how I did that and how I went about that. So I started to show others. And then I started to find out that actually I was showing other people how to do this, other planners, more than I was showing customers. I've now got a community of about 800 planners globally who do what I call total wealth planning, which is financial planning without financial advice. So it's financial planning without the product sale. What makes us different is we're not selling products, we're selling plans. That's purely what we do. And it takes away the incentive as well, because a lot of financial planners who are also selling investments probably only get paid if they sell investments. But obviously, if you're perhaps looking at a property purchase or something like that instead, it shouldn't really matter what the outcome is to determine how much the planner is paid. And that's really the model.
I get the model and I like the model. And I think deep down, if people were asked the question, would you rather remove the conflict of interest from somebody selling something that makes money for the lifetime of how long you own it? Or would you rather have someone help you with the plan? Or better still, empower you to be able to work a plan and call on the design of the plan when the complexity demands that. Is that your view?
Yeah, so I call it proportional planning. What I mean by that is that 90% of people, 90% of the time can take care of their own plans without needing third-party experts to help them, because in those circumstances, they're relatively simple and straightforward. In times of complexity, stress, or life change, that can change, and you do need an expert on your side of the table, not on the industry side, who's going to guide you through that period. But once you're done, the idea really should be to restore your capability so that you once again can run your own finances without needing ongoing support. Now, that model is completely opposite to the way the regulated financial advice market works, because what they're looking for is wealthy delegators who are going to delegate running their finances on a year by year forever sort of basis. But in reality, the 90% of people, 90% of the time, don't need that type of service. So it's what I call proportional planning. And 90% of people, 90% of the time, what I call that capability that they have, I call agency. And what I mean by that is where you have control and ownership of your own decisions. You have decision-making, call it decision-making capital, which is where you're not asking someone else to make the decisions for you. You are capable and well-informed, and you're making your own decisions based on the pros and cons. And when it gets complex, you can have an expert on your side of the table, professional ally who's got no conflicts of interest, who's going to give you the right answers just to help you through that moment and get you back so that you are managing your own finances once again.
The whole concept, though, of agency is becoming much more enlivened with AI, isn't it? This whole talk about agents and agentic approach to life. What's your thoughts about AI? Secondly, so I want to ask you if you and I find ourselves as intelligent people wanting to serve others well, see from the same perspective, why is so much of the advice given in this country driven from the opposite perspective?
We look historically, there's been what I call information asymmetry. The financial industry is very complex, opaque, and perhaps deliberately so in order to justify fee revenue, which is the way it's been. And individuals have been very disadvantaged in that scenario, not having access to the same information that the industry has. So there's been an information asymmetry, capability asymmetry. And what has happened with AI is that's changed that. Suddenly, what we're finding is that individuals are going on to AI tools like ChatGPT or Claude and preparing their finances before a conversation with the industry. So in October, I turned up to a meeting wanting to do some cash flow planning with the client. The client had already done it on Claude. A couple of weeks ago, I was talking to a planner who went to see a client who'd already bought their investments using ChatGPT. So this is more and more the case. They say now that as many as 80% of high net worth individuals are using AI for financial planning. Now, what the industry is doing is they're talking about AI, but they're talking about it to make it more profitable for them to distribute investments so that they have lower overheads, so they can see more people, so they can sell investments to people. So all the AI focus in the industry has been on the industry and the firms. And what I'm doing is I'm saying, well, what about the individuals? So I'm promoting AI to individuals. I'm creating package solutions for individuals, which are available freely to the public. And I'm not doing this because I don't see AI as a bad thing. I see AI as very positive. I see AI as a multiplier of your human capital. And you can use AI, you can be tenfold more productive, and your ideas and your business ideas are 10 times better using AI than they're not using it. I don't see it as a substitute for judgment, though, human judgment. I see it as a co-pilot for the human. So the best solutions for me are human expert with the judgment, oversight, that sort of thing, and AI kind of leveraging human capital, and so with a tenfold improvement in productivity. And those two things should go together, and they should be really for individuals and not necessarily the industry. I know the industry is building their tools and things, but I'm really shouting out for the individuals, saying, try AI. It's going to make you 10 times more successful and productive in what you're doing. The industry is using AI. 100% of the legal industry are now using AI. If they're using AI, don't listen to them when they say, don't use AI, it hallucinates and everything, because I'll tell you what, they're using it, and if they're using it, that's a good indication you should be too.
Well, it's interesting, although there has been some interesting cases where lawyers have been responsible for the advice that's been delivered by AI and found to be wrong, and working out who's got the legal responsibility for that. But there you go.
I agree with that, but that's delegating to the AI. And I'm saying that's giving agency to your AI agent.
I'm agreeing with you that that's not the purpose. It's to be as you say, good leverage to your own intentions, which means you often, from both of our viewpoints, I suppose, need someone to be thinking very carefully about what outcome they want as opposed to what product they want. If AI is going to drive down the cost of many activities, including the activity of managing funds and so forth, yet so much money is charged from the process of managing funds, where do you think the saving that it costs the industry to manage funds more effectively, and will that be passed on to the retail customer, or are we asking for turkeys to vote for Christmas, Steve? What do you think?
I think we're asking for turkeys to vote for Christmas. I think we're basically where we are at the moment is there's what I call a cash cow, which is the old status quo. And that's going, the incumbents are going to keep that, but going to protect that as long as they possibly can. So we might see another few years where they're protecting margins. They're using AI to increase the profitability, to increase margins, and not passing on this cost savings to the consumer at present, and hoping that they can get away with that for as long as possible. But what I'm saying is, wake up, consumers. You have a tool here. Last week, the FCA wrote out to firms, pension legacy firms, and said that there's 500 billion of assets sat in pension legacy. You're overcharging. The conversation really shouldn't be with the regulator telling firms. It should be the public being asked, did you know that 500 billion, there's 17 million policies out there which are being overcharged on their pensions? You know, an analysis, a free analysis tool like the ones we provide would enable you to identify whether yours is that case. So that's using AI at an individual level. Are you being overcharged? 10 seconds later, yes or no. And then you, from an informed decision, you can then go to the industry and say, you know, I'm being overcharged. Unless you do something about this, I'm moving it. So that's when you'll start to see change, when the individuals embrace agency.
So there's an educational process for the consumer as well. So for the longest time, they've been, I suppose, educated to delegate. And then very quickly, or really very slowly, which serves the industry, that delegation turns into abdication, and then abdication pulls all the shutters down and nobody looks at anything anymore. So what do you do at the Academy of Life Planning to help people see that? You mentioned some of the tools. I mean, every time you mention a tool, I'm playing devil's advocate here. Or well, is it easy to use? Is it only for financial planners like Steve or experts like a financial advisor?
Okay, so all the tools I provide are end user tools. So I don't believe in providing tools to planners. Planners get upset with me sometimes about that. They ask me, can we put our name on your tools, Steve, and make us look good? No, the tools are aimed at the public, so they're easily navigatable. The data that's on the tool sits on the client's drive. So the data isn't shared with the industry. It's very private to the client. I don't believe that data needs to be shared with the industry. So it's all aimed at a straightforward improving the capability and understanding of the end user, the client, the individual, the person. So it's all about empowering them. So no, I'm not providing tools for the industry to make out that the clever and you need to delegate. It's all about capability and improving the capability of individuals. That's everything.
I mean, this is a good thing for society, though, isn't it, to improve the capability of individuals, not least because all the statistics are showing how poorly pensioned we are as a country. And how does that translate into the next generation when they're starting life with more debt than they thought, with a more expensive cost to that debt than they thought? What's the view of the Academy of Life Planning on legacy and helping the next generation?
There's two aspects. The same tool I use in two communities. One is the under-pensioned pensioners. The other is the Gen Zs, or particularly not in education and employment teens. So let's take the not in education and employment teens first of all. So there's 1 million of them in the UK. The government are looking at trying to encourage them into jobs, etc., etc. They're missing the point completely. Your community get it, Kevin. It's about identifying human capital, leveraging entrepreneurial opportunities and creating a sustainable livelihood from that. It's not just about jobs. It's working out what your gifts are and skills are. And, and not in education and employment, in 16 to 24, human capital is at your highest at that age, but it's completely ignored by the industry, the conversation, the politicians never, ever talk about human capital. But at that age, that's where it's the most it'll ever be for the rest of your life. And that's where the attention needs to be given. And people need to be shown how to identify their assets, how to use things like AI to create that multiple, to leverage entrepreneurial opportunities, to create earnings for your lifetime and get you into doing something that you're good at, that you love, that we will pay you for. And that kind of works there. In pensioners, people now in defined contribution pension schemes are coming up to retirement, realising that they're not going to have as much as their predecessors, the baby boomers in the final salary schemes. What they're going to do, again, the industry are being silent on the real solution, which is human capital. And what we should be doing is people 50 plus, we should be identifying their human capital and showing them how they could leverage through entrepreneurial opportunities to create earnings to make good deficits in pension pots. It's not all about savings, it's also about earnings, and that those earnings people can carry on earning into their 60s, 70s, 80s is if they're doing something they love to do and is not a great strain on them.
Not stacking shelves in Sainsbury's, you mean?
That's right, yes.
It's interesting. I was talking to a guy who he's a business coach by nature, and he was running a school for the over 50s to teach more entrepreneurialism within them, because they'd almost got to a point where, I suppose in their early 50s, if they'd been made redundant or if they'd got ill or something had kind of changed their outlook on life forever, really, how they could use some of that life skill, that life's work, and dive a bit deeper into their human capital, let's say, using your terms, and then turning that into some sort of entrepreneurial outcome. The problem was, though, they stopped the funding for it because people couldn't afford to do it on their own. And he's saying, we just can't get the funding anymore. So we had it for a few years. So, as a result of that, there's just no money to provide that. And is there money at the younger end of the spectrum? I've not heard of that.
No, there isn't. So, there is proposals to create funding locally for the Gen Zs to get into employment. But I'm talking about a solution that doesn't require funding. We actually use this solution in communities globally, particularly Southern Hemisphere communities. There's a project that's being sponsored by the Church of England. It's a global project, and it's creating sustainable livelihoods in poor communities. And the starting point is we're not going to put in a strategy that relies on external funding. What we're going to do instead, this project is based on identifying the human capital in the community. So what does the community own that they could leverage to create entrepreneurial opportunity and sustainable livelihood? That might be skills, it might be local resources, whatever it is. So they're trying to work on starting with what you've got. And at the Academy, we do the same thing. It's working out with what you've got. The tools that I'm providing are free, so there's no need for funding. So there's a tool called Get Secure, which is aimed at, it's a financial planning tool. It's free. It's aimed at communities where there's income insecurity, and they can access it, and it takes a couple of hours to go through the program, but you come out with a plan which identifies what you're good at, what you would love to do, what the world needs, and would generate income for you. And it uses in the Get Secure plan AI, has an AI analysis component which says, okay, these are the things you're good at. Here's how AI can help multiply that in terms of revenue. That tool is free. So there's no excuse, no reason why people can't access that. It's not requiring external funding. It's available on the internet. Any of these things I'm talking about, by the way, Kevin, are available on the Academy of Life Planning website.
Well, we'll put that in the show notes and ask you if there's any other tools that you think would be valuable. I mean, I suppose, as I sit here chewing the fat with you and thinking I'm agreeing, yet you and I are sort of seem to be ploughing quite a lonely furrow in the context of the totality of the amount of people who would profit from better use of their human capital, more control over their agency, less dependency and more independence. Yet it's so hard to find.
Yes, it is. And that's, again, comes down to the cash cow strategy. Basically, the industry incumbents are trying to make as much money, making hay while the sun shines as long as possible, and are very resistant. So as an example, I wanted to talk about these things at conferences, CISI, PFS conferences,
These are national conferences linked to the financial industry, right?
Yeah, that's right. So they're very resistant to allowing me airtime. They made a mistake. The PFS made a mistake and actually invited me to the conference in Birmingham. And then half an hour later, I got a rejection letter saying, "Oh, we made a mistake. We didn't mean to invite you, Steve." So it's, I think it had gone up and said, "No, you're not going to invite him. He's going to tell people why they don't need financial advisors." So yeah, it's we're in a world where the common narrative is preserving the status quo. The thing is, though, that things are changing very rapidly. Like I say, 80% or more in some areas are using technology, individuals are using technology to do their finances. I think at some point, the industry needs to wake up to that. The thing is that the baby boomers aren't that receptive to new technology. But if you go down the generations, the X's, the Y's, the Z's, you'll find they're all using technology. And when we see, 6 trillion of assets migrate on the succession plans from the baby boomers to the Gens, X, Y's and Z's.
Yeah, the great wealth transfer, as they're called.
Great wealth transfer. That's when things will change, because they're not going to want granddad's IFA, when they get the inheritance. They'll be very happy running their own finances. Thank you very much. So it's going to change in that way. So it might happen quickly, but it's certain to happen over a generation or two.
Do you find that the people who are joining you have come from the traditional background because that's possibly where they got taught and then began to resist the teaching as they saw the era of the ways of the big industry?
Interesting question. And if you'd asked me a few years ago, I said, yes, that's where they come from. I think it's 3/4 of the Academy membership are chartered or certified financial planners, very highly qualified individuals, tends to be people retiring from regulated, as I put it. But what I've found is that that's not been the best source of new members to the Academy. The best source of new members to the Academy have been other financial professionals. There's a million financial professionals in the UK who aren't advisors, wealth managers, relationship managers working for the asset management industry, actuaries, accountants. These are the people who want to get into personal financial planning, but don't want to sell products. Often they get sucked into a job that's selling products, not sold on that basis, but they find out a year into it that that's the basis of the job. You're just a product salesperson, maybe with sales targets on your back and things like that. Those are the people who didn't want that then come into the Academy and want to be what I call a proper financial planner doing life planning. That tends to be the new people. There is a third piece that I'll just mention, which is because the cash cow is still a cash cow, I'm getting more resistance in my business-to-business side of the Academy. I think the community of planners in general are not ready for change just yet, but their customers are. Customers are ready now. So what I'm doing is I'm turning my attention really more to their customers and saying, okay, your advisors aren't ready yet for this change, but you are, and I'm hearing you, and here you go, here's the support.
Just thinking about other groups of people who come from a place of trying to serve business owners, let's say, and other planners, where they have the trusted ear of the individual. They already know that they can be trusted to try and help them achieve a certain outcome. I'm thinking, is there an opportunity for business coaches who are seeing the inside of a business to then kind of relate that back to what is the life that they're trying to create for someone? I was talking to somebody in their business recently, and they said, my kids are in Greece and I'm staying here because I've got to finish something. It's like, well, what? Nobody got into business, but to send their kids to Greece and you stay home because you've got to finish your project. That doesn't happen. I'm just wondering whether or not there's an interesting range of other people who might serve your academy. I'm just curious.
So business exit strategists really should do a life plan before they do the business exit strategy. So, what are you exiting to? We often say it's a big psychological change for an individual to go from running a business to living in Greece. You go from what we say, who's who, to who's he. There's a big shift, and that's a bit of a shock. So it helps to actually plan post-exit in the same way. Yeah, it's not just about regulated investments. Regulated investments is just 1% of the market. And the ONS survey excluded business assets in that research. So because they couldn't value private businesses for the ONS Wealth and Asset Management Survey. So it's a chunk of people who have business assets there who aren't being served.
But also given that the inheritance tax relief on business assets for a couple was 5 million, let's say, potentially, compared to, say, max of 1 million for a couple building wealth with traditional regulated investments. You think that would come up somewhere?
As a total wealth planner, you definitely think that would come up. But if you're just a retail regulated investment planner, then it's like you say, you're talking about the £1 million sort of wealth. I mean, that used to be more than 1 million when pensions were outside of a state for inheritance tax purposes. So that situation is deteriorating for the regulated advisor community.
Don't get me on that one, Steve. Don't get me on that one. I think my audience know I'm on that soapbox most weeks, so I'll stay off it this week and leave the soapbox to you. Another interesting thing for me to get your take on is, if we look at the great wealth transfer again, right, we recognize that there will be a generational transfer, for sure. And you touched on the fact that many of the younger generation, I often call them the rising generations, the rising generation will be receiving money potentially and won't necessarily want to go back to the place where mum and dad perhaps got the original advice. And I get that, which seems to me like the writing's on the wall for that. But I wonder what's your take on the fact that the vast majority of those assets, before they get into the hands of children, will typically get in the hands of a spouse. And with your age, women living longer than men, and let's just call it typically, lots of women will inherit, but may not have had the financial capability, may not have been encouraged to have that capability. What are you doing at the Academy of Life Planning to help them?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example, a case I work with. I've got a testimonial from the lady, so she won't mind me telling you. Her name's Lisa. Basically, she's mid-50s, and her husband managed the finances, ran portfolios with AJBL Vanguard, ran a deposit portfolio, about 3 million. He died, and she became a widow. And she was lost, obviously going through a lot of grief and pain at the time. She went to approach an IFA and said, the IFA said what he could do for her. And then she came to see me. And she said, you would never believe what this IFA quoted on charges. She said, I might as well have handed over the keys to my house the amount he wanted in fees. So I work on this proportional planning basis. So my aim was not to do anything other than to help this widow, Lisa, get back onto being able to look after the portfolio herself. At first, it was very difficult. We had to cancel meetings because she had brain fog because of the grief. So but I was gentle with her. And I showed her how to. She had about £1 million deposit portfolio. And I showed her how to, as things run off terms, then how to replace that. And she became confident doing that herself. And I explained about the passive, globally diversified investment strategies her husband had used with Vanguard and AJ Bell. And I explained how all that worked. And I explained it's really, you can do it and forget it. And she became that confident that after 18 months, she turned around to me and said, Steve, thank you very much. I'm now confident. I know exactly what I'm doing. And I really don't need you anymore for this. Now, that would be bad news for a regulated advisor who's thinking of tapping into fees for the rest of their life. But this is exactly what I was doing. I was doing what I call proportional planning, which is I just planned while people are going through complexity, stress, or change, and then get them on where they get the capability back. And I believe that's the way the industry should work. We shouldn't have this lazy income thing where people are taking fees off people who don't need fees taken off them, that don't really need planning. And Lisa gave me a fantastic testimonial. She's given me great referrals from her friends, and I've used that to great effect in the business. And I believe that's the way to go forward.
Did you see the article recently where the FCA were chipping in because a number of financial advisors were charging fees to people who'd already died?
That's right, yes. I wrote a blog, I'm quite a prolific blogger, as you probably know, Kevin. And yes, I wrote about that, and I think I upset a few people. But it's true, the people, they didn't have processes in place that recognise immediately when they get notification of death that the client has died. Yes, they do have advice requirement, the executors, the family, etc. But there's no contract with the executor. There's no contract with the family. So they had no ability to take fees. So I do think there's a big fee for no service scandal brewing. I think the FCA is trying to keep a lid on it because they're worried about the impact it might have on the government's growth agenda. But things like this come out that people, I call it I see dead people. It's an
interesting business model, isn't it? I find the obituary columns and then end up just giving advice to the dead people and keeping the money. Anyway, we run the risk of being a bit cynical, but I did post myself about even some of the more highbrow companies. Generally try not to name things when if I can avoid it, but double dipping, so charging funds and then charging money on the cash in the funds, taking interest and doing it deliberately for margin, as you said before. And I think for many people who listen to me or listen to you, we talk about these things with great transparency, but I think most people think we're either having a go or a pop at an industry, because what I tend to see when people meet me for the first time is, but my money's doing okay. It's going up anyway. So almost like, why are you telling me this? Rather than working out that the fees are like a tax and you're robbing yourself of the agency of being able to do things for yourself and understand what's happening and not end up just hoping one day, someday, the pot's going to be big enough to support you when it might not.
There's a lot of psychology involved in this. So people don't like to admit that they've been making a mistake for the last 10, 20 years. And if you tell them, actually, they've been double dipping on you all these years, or they've been taking a fee for no service, or, oh, yes, there's a big distributor company, which I'm not going to mention its name.
It's all right,
No, the one. Yeah, but it's but basically they've been. They say, well, you're doing better than if you left your money in the bank. That isn't a good comparison. As it's really. They might have done better than if they'd left the money in the bank, but they wouldn't do they're not doing as well as if they just got into the market directly themselves. They would do 10 times better. And it can make a massive difference, even over 5 years. It can make a huge difference to people's finances. But people are kind of reassured, oh, yes, I did. It went up this year, so I'm happy, and not really asking, so some of the illustrations are taking half of the profit as fees. And, you're thinking if the advice firm is taking half my profits as advice fees, then they only need 2 clients, and they're earning as much as we are. And they've got hundreds of clients. So just think how much they're earning for that. So it's like an interesting model, but it's a psychological piece that it's very difficult to get across to people that you're being exploited.
I definitely feel that more the case with men, strangely. Almost like, I don't want you to prove that I've been doing it wrong. That's the assumption in the underpinning thought when, you've got something's happened in the past. Now you've got clarity. You can't really unlearn it now. So now you can do something about it or not, as the case may be.
So I have free tools. One's called the Leveler, which allows you to look at contracts and hide hidden terms and brings that out. Another's called Investigator, which allows you to look at investments, to understand this kind of due diligence program on investments. They're both free, but it kind of really, you could put in one of these contracts into the Investigator and it'll tell you in 10 seconds exactly where it falls, where the red flags are. And one of the things the FCA criticised asset management companies for last week is their opacity in their disclosure documents. They're not explaining the full extent of charges, etc., etc. So we really need AI tools to go to consumers directly to help them see the truth. That's all I'm saying. I'm not being attacking anyone. I'm just saying this is the truth. This is actually what it says in their own documents that they're not showing you and not explaining to you. But this is it in black and white. These are the pros and cons of what you're doing.
Well, anyway, it's interesting talking about the comparison. We've spent a lot of time talking about the 1% club, right? Where the money is. But the real skill in all of this is designing a life, isn't it, really? And then choosing the right tools to help deliver that. Steve, if people want to find out a little bit more, they resonate with you like I resonate with you, and they want to find out more about the Academy of Life Planning or the tools, where would they go to find more about you?
Yeah, so they go to the website, academyoflifeplanning.com.
We'll put that in the show notes so people can find it easily rather than rely on voices, which can sometimes, when they're using their AI, can be transposed. The number of times AI gets SAS spelled wrong. I can't tell you, even though we tried to correct it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times.
But there's a kind of a Start Here page. That homepage is a Start Here page and points you to the various tools and techniques, depending on what you need from the journey.
Steve, it's been a real pleasure, and I know we're like-minded, so it feels like we're sort of just, I guess, really just chewing the fat a bit, but with real purpose in mind. That I don't think for anybody this is too complex. They can learn how to take responsibility for as many of their own decisions as they want to. And I like your phrase, although I don't think it would be in common parlance. What did you call it? Proportionate?
Yeah, proportional planning.
Proportional planning. I don't think anybody's ever heard of that, but I get the point that when life throws you a curveball, when a big chapter in your life opens or closes, that's a time when a good advisor will be worth their weight in gold to you. Don't pay them in gold. Just pay them a set fee, and they can, try and help you understand what the pros and cons are, the decisions that you'd be faced with. Steve, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time today. And everyone else, look after yourself. Until then, see ya.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget that we are constantly updating our resources inside the WealthBuilders membership site to help you create, build, and protect your wealth. Head over to wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership right now for free access. That's wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership.